Adequate notice of this meeting was provided by sending such notice to the Asbury Park Press, the Middletown Patch, the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the August T. Minor administrative offices in each elementary, middle, and secondary school in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminiti?
Here.
Mr. Cody?
Here.
No.
Mr. DeFranco? Mr. Donlin?
Here.
Mr. Little?
Here.
Mrs. Stella?
Here.
Mrs. Walsh?
Here.
Mrs. Rogers?
Here.
Mrs. Minutis?
Yeah. We need a motion to go into closed session for matters of personnel, negotiations, and contracts, right?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Opposed?
Well, I mean,
We're going to open the meeting, and then the first thing will be the... Okay, we're going to bring this meeting to order. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided by sending such notice to the Asbury Park Press, the Middletown Patch, and the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the August T. Minor administrative offices and each elementary, middle, and secondary school in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminiti?
Here.
Mr. Cody?
Here.
Mr. DeFranco? Mr. Donlin?
Here.
Mr. Little?
here.
Mrs. Stella?
Here.
Mrs. Walsh?
Here.
Mrs. Rogers?
Here.
Mrs. Minutis?
Here. Okay, we're going to stand for the pledge, and please stand for a moment of silence for Sean Sullivan, a graduate of High School South in 2006, passed away on March 14th. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, just so everyone knows, we have cut out any of our presentations tonight except for the budget, so that we could get through with our business and hopefully get everybody out of here at a reasonable time before the weather is really, really bad. We thank you all for coming out in this weather. We know it wasn't an easy decision, but we really thought we needed to do the budget presentation tonight. Okay.
I thought it was over.
Do we want to do all the new business right now so we don't do it at the end while we're waiting for Amy to boot that? Sure.
Dr. George, I mentioned to you a while ago about sign language.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
What?
We are considering,
I found out something. Brookdale offers a course on sign language, being that we do that we work with Brookdale and we let our students say, can we partnership with sign language there? It's a whole curriculum type thing?
that's certainly something we could consider for a new enrollment program. Probably doesn't fit into the current pathways for early college academy. That doesn't mean it can't be new enrollment. Certainly something worth considering. I just had a meeting with Dr. David Stout, the interim president of Brookdale, the other day, talking, and with other superintendents last Friday, talking about our early college academy and our dual enrollment programs with the other districts in Monmouth County, the things we could do to build upon them, giving them some comparisons with some of our other dual enrollment programs, and maybe some things that would be more beneficial to our students. And I have to say that Dr. Stout was a great listener and an active participant in the conversation and very open to building on our current program. So certainly that's something I feel comfortable sharing with him.
Great. I
Yeah,
hope
thank
we
you.
get it. Okay, thank you.
We are also looking as we expand our language options. As a matter of fact, that was something that we discussed as part of our with CUSAC the other day with the county and the Department of Education and the county superintendent, his CUSAC team. They liked that idea as something that we were looking at, taking on sign language as another form of language, adding to what we currently have, which is French, Italian, Latin, Spanish, I think that's it, right? And adding sign language. So it is something that we've had conversations about in the past, and we're moving in that direction as we move forward.
Are we looking at any other languages, being that you mentioned language? Are we looking at any, are we looking at Mandarin by any chance?
Yeah, a lot of districts have Chinese in there.
Not Chinese, Mandarin is like a specific,
Right.
not,
We haven't, that hasn't been a topic that we've discussed recently.
Okay.
Sign language has been our focus.
great.
Maybe next curriculum would be about that.
Anybody have any other old or new business that they'd like to bring up? This would be a good time on the
I just wanted to mention that I saw online, everybody, that the snow or no snow, the plays will go on this weekend. So if you have young kids, they are so terrific. North is anything goes, and South, so you can buy tickets. For South, you buy online at booktix.com, and they're doing Heathers. And the North play, you can just show up and buy them, and they're Friday and Saturday night, and they're still going on no matter what. And I have tickets for both for my kids. We go every year. It's phenomenal.
Better than a Broadway play, let me tell
Yes,
you.
it is.
The talent that we have in Middletown is amazing.
John, I have a couple things if you don't mind. You said new business?
Yep.
Okay. We were at a municipal alliance meeting Saturday, John, and a couple of things that came up that I wanted to share with you, to see where we're going as a district. One thing that got brought up by one of the people there was energy drinks in our vending machines. You know, what kind of drinks are we putting into the vending machines, and are they sanctioned by the state as far as what can be sold in our machines?
That's a good question. I thought that they had to be sanctioned by the state or they couldn't be in them.
So we have some of the business to that, see what's going on in vending machines.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
In your vending machine
Coke,
separate
Coke,
from
etc.
our food service venue, or they?
No, we
Yeah.
we administer those through the food service. so.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be sure that there's none of these wired up energy drinks in the machines.
Well, everything is monitored for things that comply with these standards. So
So it's there, it's good.
if it's there, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have like monster drink.
Did they
Right.
imply that there were, Mike?
Yeah.
They implied that we have these kind of drinks there?
There has been some discussion about certain products, but again, everything we sell is in compliance, so it's the choice of the student whether they purchase that or not.
There were also a couple of administrative things that they
Yeah, Jim,
Right, and we did,
doing
right, and we did hear from them that everything that they were questioning was within compliance, and actually there was comparisons of those products to things like iced tea and things like that. They were.
So therefore, within their rights as vendors. too.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, and then the other thing was we had a discussion on recreational marijuana. And the question was, where do we sit as a board in support or non-support of the use of recreational marijuana?
Isn't that a personal choice?
It's a
I'm
question.
just
It's a
asking,
question.
isn't that a
Well, you know why?
personal choice?
Because it's like, you know, we don't allow drinking on premises, so to speak, okay? What rules do we have in place
Well, I'm sure-
for marijuana use?
Oh, so you're asking district
Okay,
rules.
and then also, you know, we're also trying to promote different things to people in their homes, how to teach their kids lifestyle changes. You know, are we as a board looking to do anything to support not
As a participant in the Alliance is definitely making a stand against it. We, you know, obviously,
And they should.
we sit in the audience, I mean, we're just, you know, we sit there as liaisons to it. So, you know, they're definitely strongly, they're strongly against, you know, any kind of legalization of recreational marijuana. Mike and I were just wondering, you know, there's some audience, but because we have underage, you know, 9,500 underage children in our district, right? So regardless of what it is, you know, any kind of, potentially any additional sort of availability. And we're just asking if we had a, you know, we were trying to.
We have rules.
Yeah.
If I could just use an analogy.
You know, we're sitting there, so everyone's like, yeah, we're against it, you know, as a board, we don't make comments, we don't make, so we're just wondering if we just want to.
If I could just use an analogy though.
Yeah.
In 1981, the drinking age was 18. And there were students in high school that were 18 in 1981. But drinking was never allowed in school. Drinking alcohol was never something that was, so, you know, I just, as a comparison, I mean, that's just something.
No, what I'm saying is,
It's not appropriate.
what I'm saying is, if the
It
Alliance.
can never be appropriate. We don't allow smoking on school property. It's legal for 21-year-olds, but we don't allow smoking on.
No, I wasn't up with the rules. I'm saying if the Alliance makes a stand, a public stand, we just,
Right, and
we're not part of that.
We're members of that stand, we're members of the Alliance. The question is, with recreational use, look at all the presentations we've had on vaping.
Yeah.
Are we doing anything, or will we do anything on
Yes.
recreational use of marijuana?
Yes, as a health-related issue, we have a responsibility to educate. That's great enough.
Fifth graders.
That is a
Some
health.
of that now.
Like Project
when
Plus.
we
We do a lot of
Protected
that.
Garden
School
comes in and
Alliance
talks to
addresses
kids
it
about
already.
abuse of any substance.
Yes.
I mean, even at those
So many different.
those vaping presentations, you know, they explained to us what would happen if the kids get caught vaping in the school and what extent that they would go to. So I do believe that, you know, the schools are addressing the issue.
I believe that you have to be 21, right, to buy cannabis if it's legalized?
I
I think
They haven't made the laws yet.
But I think that's what they're going for 21.
But we would have a responsibility on health-related issues to report out the facts and the dangers, just as we do with alcohol or vaping.
You know, Project Plus through the Municipal Alliance, I believe it's available to either fourth or fifth graders.
Fifth grade.
I've
Mike's
done
in
it.
part of that.
I've
Right,
been doing
so
that for
they
4 years
definitely
now, yes.
addressed
But that's
it.
a small
Right.
group of fifth graders, you know what I mean? It's
Right,
not-
but yeah, I know that they
it's not
address it through the Municipal Alliance
everyone else.
already, so
But, you know,
that's.
we are addressing it at our high school level, at our middle school level, and we are right now looking at it for curriculum as part of our health in our fourth or fifth grades. With vaping, we have, it's like cigarette smoking, we have to start young, and you can't wait until they're in ninth graders. I mean, they're exposed to this, and they know it's out there, there's these vape stores all over town right now, so, not only for the drug component of it, that's a possibility, but also the health component of just smoking some of these substances that are not drugs, but just really bad for your health. You know, sometimes people in the community or even, you know, elsewhere see it as like, oh, that's healthy smoking. It's really not smoking. And it is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, to your lungs and your overall health than cigarettes. So that's what we're trying to educate students for. In fact, today, Mr. Anella and Mr. Letson, the SAC at South, were down in Atlantic City at the police convention for the marijuana symposium, and they were talking about making resolutions against it in the different towns and everything. So we are working, you know, to fight this.
So I guess we're saying we'll have to just modify any kind of messaging. Like one of the concerns is that, you know,
Should go through the.
yeah, alcohol is legal, so, you know, sometimes some kids may view that as a timing issue until I'm 21. So if you legalize recreational marijuana, it becomes less of, well, it's not good for me, it's just a timing issue. And we're just
That's
deferring with the Municipal Alliance
Yeah.
concern for underage people. It's like saying, well, okay, if I drink when I'm 19, okay, all right, kid might think, oh, 2 years, you know, it's not like the end of the world. But now that messaging, we might have to see maybe the Drug-Free America, maybe the organizations we partner with will have to sort of alter the message along the lines of how they talk about alcohol.
And
Is that what I'm saying?
let's not forget, we have social behavior support specialists in elementary schools. We have our SACs in our middle schools and our high schools. We have a coordinated effort of counseling that can address those issues. And this is a health-related issue, and it's absolutely appropriate for the board to discuss, and we should be bringing that
Well, I'm
information
glad,
back.
because Mike, you know, we're obviously liaisons, just like we bring up any other partnership that we're involved in, you know, what goes on in the conversation. So this has been going on for like the last 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we just want to let people know we're not trying to
You know,
stir
it's
a pot.
good. No, it's good.
Gotcha. Thank you.
It's very
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, I think at this time we're ready for the presentation, right, Ms. Kelly?
So over the past several months, we've been talking to the board and to the public about components of our 2018-19 budget. We are at the point now in the timetable of budget approvals that we were looking to have an approval of our tentative budget, hopefully at our board meeting next week. So in preparation for that, we are giving you an update of where we are with the budget process and the components as we see it right now of next year's budget and the considerations and the deliberation that we still need to have. So from that perspective, tonight's focus will be on the background to the 18-19 budget, give you an overall background of how we got to where we are in the process, current budget considerations, and the remaining timeline of what we have to do with the budget. So we just want to remind everybody that our budget process, as it is every year, is tied back to our mission statement. Our current mission statement, as you see it stated up here and is on our website, was developed during the strategic planning process that was done for the years 2015 to 2020. So we are about midway through the process on our strategic plan. But just to remind everybody that when we do our budget, it is driven by the objectives and the goals that we have identified in our strategic plan and is geared toward achieving those. So the next few slides are just to give you a background of some information that is to be considered as we prepare the budget. Things that we aren't necessarily in control of each year, but things that are put in place and we have to deal with in each budget. First of all is our principal and interest due on our bonds. Now, for those of you who sat through budget presentations before, you know that bonds are only authorized by referendum. So when we issue bonds, it's authorized by a separate vote by the community to authorize the issuance of that debt for certain purposes. Right now, we have 3 outstanding bond issuances to pay off in the upcoming years. So we have our refunding bonds from 2010 and 2013 and our 2014 issue. The refunding bonds from 2010 and 2013 are previous bond issues that we've, for lack of a better word, refinanced at a better rate going forward than we've saved interest on. So we are still paying off the balance of those. They mature in 2027, and we have $4,700,000 and $700,000 outstanding on those respectively. And then we have the 2014 bond issue that we did. If you remember, we did a variety of roofing and HVAC improvements that we also had significant funding from the state for in the form of ROD grants to supplement that bond issue. But we have $1.5 million in payments due on that for this year. So overall, we have a little over $7 million that we have to pay next year in bond payments for these outstanding bonds. Our total outstanding bonds at June 30th, 2018 will be a little over $60 million that we'll be paying off over the next several years. But I just want to put it in perspective. When the budgets were going out to vote and we were doing that process, this part of the budget was never up to a vote because you previously approved it when you did the referendum. So this has to be paid regardless of what we decide to do with the tax levy. Our other debt that we have outstanding at this point are technology lease payments, and those are included in our operating budget, the payments on those leases. We have taken upon it the budget process to eliminate those lease payments going forward, but we still have lease payments due from 14, 15, 15, 16, and 16, 17 that are, the payments are included in this year's budget of $796,000. What we've been looking to do going forward, and we've been able to do over the last 2 years, is to eliminate the reliance on lease payments to fund our technology budget and to fund it out of our current budget so that we would be using current monies to fund our current expenditures and not locking it up into lease payments that we do over 5 years. But the reason why this slide is important is just to show that $796,000 is due on lease payments that we have to pay off for the next few years for technology that was financed in previous years for purchases of machines and technology for the schools. But we are each year dropping one of these leases, and we will be reducing that, and that will be going back into our operating budget to spend on current purchases. So at the end of this year, our outstanding technology leases will be about almost $1,600,000, $1,571,000. So we are working on reducing that each year, and we will be not relying on those funds going forward. Another area we want to review with everybody is our reliance on surplus. And there's a lot of talk about excess surplus at the end of the year and what we could possibly do with that or what happens if we have that occur. Just to let everybody know what excess surplus is. Excess surplus would be the amount of money that we are able to save out of a current year's budget that would be above the 2% fund balance that we are recommended and encouraged to keep by the Department of Ed as our fund balance going forward. And it would be 2% of our operating budget that they would want us to keep on hand. So anything over that would be available to use for a couple of different things. One would be if we just left it as excess surplus, it could be deemed to be used for a future budget. In some cases, we are able to use those funds to deposit into capital reserve and use for future capital projects that we would not go out for separate funding for. But the reason why this slide is important is to see is that we have reduced our amount of reliance on excess surplus in our budget from just around the $2 million mark in 2013 down to a current reliance on surplus for the operating budget of a little over $500,000 for the current year. So the reason why we have made that choice to reduce that surplus is because we don't want to rely on something that may not be a recurring revenue in the budget, and then if you go to the next year and it's not available, then you are left to make up those funds in a current budget. So this has been a strategic reduction on reliance on surplus, and if we've had surplus available at the end of the year, some of it's been allocated toward use for a future budget, and some of it has been put toward capital reserve, which we've used to fund capital improvements in the district, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So just so everybody gets a recap of what we have on hand for capital maintenance reserves for 17-18, for the 16-17 year, we had a remaining balance in capital reserves of just a little over $500,000. For the year ended June 30th, 2017, we were able to allocate $1 million out of monies that we were able to save out of that budget to add to capital reserve. So we increased that balance to $1,500,000 for the end of last year. In addition to that, we have a little over $700,000 in maintenance reserves, which is left over from monies that was deposited several years ago into maintenance reserve. We've drawn down a little bit for some unexpected maintenance requirements at different facilities that we've had to use. We haven't added to that, but we still keep this $704,000 to use in case of something that we come across during the course of the year that we didn't anticipate in our regular operating budget, we have those monies to fall back out. Now, keep in mind that we are maintaining 17 buildings, and there is quite a bit of things that need to be done, so to have this amount of reserve is absolutely appropriate and well below the guidelines that are given by the Department of Ed for keeping those reserves in place. Grant funding, there's a lot of discussion about grant funding when you're talking about budgets. Our two major grants that we receive in the district are federally funded, federal and state funded. Primarily IDEA, which targets special education expenditures, and ESEA, which targets at-risk populations within the district. So for this year, we received a little over $2.7 million in IDEA funds and about $754,000 in ESEA funds, which is for our at-risk populations. When we do our budget for the upcoming year, we don't know what those allocations are going to be for next year. The guidelines are to say that we should budget between 75 and 90% of those funds being received for the next year, which we have incorporated into next year's budget proposal. And those funds are used to offset in special education things like out-of-district tuitions and some related services. For the ESEA funds, we use that primarily for salaries of teaching staff that's targeted toward helping those populations and some supplies as well. But we've already incorporated those into our budget. So to give you an overview of our revenue, as far as the revenue that we can anticipate coming in for next year, it's broken up into these major categories. We have our tax levy, and our budget is primarily funded by tax levy. At this point, we are, roughly 90% tax levy, 10% state aid, 89-11. It's around those ratios, but we're primarily funded by tax levy here in Middletown. So if we look at our available revenue for the upcoming year, for 17-18, our tax levy was a little over $139 million. If we add the allowable increase of 2% onto the tax levy for next year, that would give us revenue available of $141,861, which would be an increase of $2.7 million for next year. Our state aid, we did receive our allocation last week for our state aid. It was a little bit delayed for this year, but for this year, we realized over last year an additional $506,000 in state aid, which of course we're grateful for. We're thankful that it's more and not less. We went into the budget process thinking that we would be good if we were able to just remain whole. We did receive a small increase, but that is another $506,000. Extraordinary aid is amounts that we get back from the state upon application for certain special education expenses, and we're anticipating $1.3 million in that area. Fund balance is the excess surplus that we talked about that we can use to offset a future budget, and we are, for the 18-19 budget, we have $534,000 available there. Our other local sources is made up of things like tuition and refunds and other miscellaneous revenue that we can bring into the district. That we're budgeting $700,000 to bring in from other sources. We are also funding this budget proposal with $1.5 million from capital reserve, which would come out of the amounts that we've been able to save out of previous budgets. And our federal aid, semi, is the amount that we are able to recap from Medicare for services that we provide to certain students, and we have to put in an application for that, get those and reimbursement back, and we anticipate about $123,000 from that. So all told, with a available 2% increase to the budget, we would be looking at revenues of $164,364,000, which would be about a 2.88% increase over last year's revenues. On the appropriation side, which is the expenditure side, breaking it down into major categories, and what we have proposed so far in the budget for this year. We have our major categories of salaries, benefits, transportation, facilities, tuition, curricular supplies, other purchase services, athletics, administrative, capital expenditures, for a total budget for 2018-19 proposed right now of $164,162,000, which would be an increase of $4.4 million over last year, which would be 2.75% of an increase. And we'll go into the details of that in the following slides. So at this point in time, looking at our budgeted revenue that's available, which would include a 2% increase in the tax levy that would be available to us, that would total $164,364,000. Right now, we have budgeted appropriations of $164,162,000. So that leaves us with unallocated revenue available to us of a little over $200,000, which means that right now we can raise a little over $200,000 more than what we have appropriated. And actually, it's a little bit more if we talked about the bank cap, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But that just gives you the bottom line of where we're at right now if we were to consider our total ability to raise revenue with the 2% tax increase. We also have bank cap that is available to the district, and we haven't incorporated that into our current budget proposal, but we just wanted to inform the public of what was available if we were going to utilize it. We have bank cap of $23,995 left over from previous years that will expire if we do not use it in this upcoming budget of $23,995. In addition, when we make the calculation for any allowable waivers due to health benefits and things like that, due to a health benefit increase, we have available bank cap of $177,000 that's being generated in the current year. Now, if that is not utilized, you can only utilize that if you go to the 2% increase in the tax levy and add that amount to it. But if you don't utilize that in the current budget, you can carry that forward for 3 years and use it in a future budget if you need to. But that amount is $177,000. So the total bank cap available, if the board wanted to avail itself of it, is $201,608 for this year. So now we want to go through some of the bigger areas in the budget that we're looking at. One that has been a frequent topic of conversation amongst our board, amongst the administration, amongst the community is the area of security. So we are looking at some changes for the upcoming budget in 18-19 in the area of security. This slide shows the personnel changes and the capital improvements that we're looking at, including into next year's budget if we move forward in that direction. Right now, we're talking about the possible addition of 12 elementary and 3 middle school safe school officers, which we're calling SSOs for this year, which would add an increased budget cost for next year's budget of $425,000. In addition, we are looking at repurposing 4 current high school guards as these safe school security officers at an additional cost of $30,000 for a total addition to the budget of $455,000 for those officers. As you may or may not know, right now we don't have security guards specifically assigned to the elementary schools, so this would assign security guards to the elementary schools and also bolster what we have in the middle school and high schools as far as security officers. Capital improvements that we're looking at in the area of security are the replacement of the PA system in High School South that we need to do, and that will cost $160,000. And also, we've allocated some funding out of our capital budget toward the securing of APR doors at the elementary schools. There are doors and hardware that need to be replaced in the APRs to allow those doors to lock for security purposes. Right now, we have $100,000 earmarked. We are further exploring what the total cost of that would be across the 12 elementary schools. It may very well be more than this $100,000. Right now, we've earmarked that to take out of capital reserve, but if we find out that the total cost will be more than that to go across the 12 elementary schools, we can either look at taking more out of capital reserve when we have more available at the end of this year, or making other adjustments in the budget, but we earmark this amount to go toward that endeavor for going forward to accomplish that.
Amy, could you just explain so people understand what an SSO is, the difference between an SSO and a security guard and an SRO?
Actually, want me to do that? Yeah.
I see everybody texting and taking pictures.
So an
Sure,
SRO
everybody
is an active
understands.
police officer that works directly for the police department. An SSO works directly with the school system and would not be carrying a weapon.
But it would be a retired law enforcement person who has that background, who has that training, and who has additional responsibilities in the school beyond that of security guard. There would be training, there would be, working with the administration more closely than a security guard would.
Another major area of the budget is personnel. Obviously, that makes up the lion's share of our budget, but this slide will highlight some of the changes that or really all the changes that we're looking at for this year outside of security. There are some positions being proposed as additions to next year's budget. One area is in the area of social behavioral support specialists for the elementary schools. We're proposing 3 additional positions in that area at a budgeted cost of $161,000. We're also looking at adding an additional guidance counselor for Thompson Middle School because of the student load and the caseload there. We're also looking at the conversion of one of our special ed supervisors from 10 to 12 months, which would add a cost to that salary. We're looking at the addition of a special ed teacher at High School South due to IEP demands and the requirement for that. We're also looking at adding an attendance clerk for the secondary schools because of the increased focus on attendance and the importance of timely communication with parents and dialogue about student attendance and the importance of that toward being able to graduate and fulfilling other requirements, and also because of the state requirements for reporting on attendance and the importance of that metric in evaluating our schools and allowing us to communicate better with the parents and with the students on possible issues in their area. We're also looking to offset some of these additions with possible reductions in staff. We do look at our enrollments, and as we've been talking about, at many board meetings over the last few years, the changes in enrollment, and we have realized a continued reduction in the enrollment at the elementary level, although it may not be spread out evenly throughout the schools. Overall, we're looking at, we've identified at least a couple of elementary positions that will be able to collapse through retirements and attrition going forward that can offset some of these additions, and we are continuing to look at these schedules at all levels to see if there are any sections that are not needed to go forward for next year that could offset these proposed additions to the budget. But for right now, we've positively identified 2 elementary positions that can be collapsed to go against these proposals for additions in personnel. I don't know if there's anything else that Dr. George or Kim you want to add to that.
No, still.
Another major driver in our budget besides personnel is benefits, and health insurance being the biggest part of our benefits scene. We have been going through the process of renewing our health insurance coverage for next year. We have not finalized our renewal for next year, but we do have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be going forward as far as an increase in premiums. And, you know, we were looking at originally a projected increase that was, you know, in the 12 to 13% range for health benefits for next year. We've been able to work through our marketing of that coverage with various carriers, and with also utilizing the knowledge of our month-to-month experience to get that increase lowered to a level where it's, you know, we're looking at a 1 to 2% increase in health benefits for next year, which is really something that we're happy about at this point. So we've been able to lower the increase from what we thought in December could be, you know, close to $3.8 million to something that's, you know, in the $500,000 range, which is obviously a lot better for our budget than it was back in December. You know, there's two components to what we have to pay out as a district for health benefits. There's what we're charged as a premium, and then what we collect from the employees as contributions toward that premium. So we have to estimate both ends of it. Obviously, the district is paying more of a percentage than the employees are, but we have to project that out too. So between the two, we're looking at, you know, a little over $500,000 increase in the area of benefits, which you know, we are happy that we were able to work that down, you know, to that level at this point. In the area of instructional technology, that's another area that, you know, we talked about the leases a little bit earlier, and we're trying to reduce the, well, we are reducing the reliance on leases to fund that area of technology, but we are funding it now through our current operating budget. And for this year, we do have, you know, one factor that we didn't have to deal with last year. Last year, we were able to fund the refreshment of the Chromebooks through the previous year's budget. We were able to save some monies out of the 16-17 budget to fund the purchase of new Chromebooks to take some older ones offline during the 17-18 school year. So we didn't include that in our current year's budget. We're not in that position at this point this year, so we are budgeting for the refresh of Chromebooks in the 18-19 budget. So as a result, that's resulting in a bit of an increase over last year that we're adding the Chromebook refresh for a little over $500,000 to take Chromebooks offline that are at the end of life and replace them with new ones. Also included in the 18-19 anticipated budget is an elementary iPad refresh of about $239,000. We are going to be looking at refreshing the iPads at the K-2 level. We are going to be repurposing a segment of iPads from the high school that are not being used into the lower grades, but in addition to that, we are also looking to buy some new iPads for that level. You know, they do not, the Chromebook 1-to-1 goes from grades 3 to 12, and so for the K-2 level, we still are using a lot of iPads, and we're looking to refresh those. We also, again, are looking at a decrease in the technology lease payments for next year. So although we have these increases for the Chromebooks and the iPads, we're offsetting that somewhat by the decrease in the lease payments on the technology leases. So the total increase we're looking at in this area is about $377,000. In the curriculum budget, we have two major drivers for an increase in that area. We have two major adoptions that we're looking at as far as new curriculum. Middle school math and pre-calc textbook adoptions are estimated to be about $376,000, and middle and high school language arts adoptions are estimated to be about $824,000. We did not have this in the current year's budget. We are looking to do this next year. We don't really have any major adoptions that were budgeted for this year, so that is driving the curriculum budget to be about $1.1 million higher than it was last year. I don't know if Mrs. Pekas, if you want to add to that at all, but it's things that are necessary and they are due to be.
We'll do it in the committee of the whole.
Okay. Transportation is another item that we talk about. It does represent a portion of our budget that's, not as big as health benefits or salaries, but it still is, roughly a $10 million expense for the district. We are looking at an increase of about 3.34% in this area. A lot of that is attributable to the fact that the contracts that we are renewing and not putting out to bid are eligible for a 1.5% increase in the renewing of those contracts. And that is really considered favorable for us because a lot of these contracts date back several years and have not kept pace with the increases in fuel and insurance and things like that, and they are capped at the amount they can renew them based on this CPI that's issued by the state every year. And this is the 7th or 8th budget I've been doing here in Middletown. There has been at least a few of those years where that CPI has been 0 and the transportation contractors have been entitled to no increase for renewing their contracts. So as we've seen fuel prices go up, we've been able to hold those contracts at a reasonable level of renewal. So they are eligible for a 1.5% increase for this year. For contracts that we're not renewing and that we're putting back out to bid, those will go out on the open market. We are looking at redoing some of the routes in the areas that we feel that we can route more efficiently and where the populations have shifted and the old routes are not efficient like they once were. So we are going to be putting several routes out to bid as well. We're also looking at an increase in the amount that parents are entitled to if they do not secure transportation through the district. And this would be primarily for the non-public transportation that we're responsible for providing. Up until last year, actually they changed the rate in August, which was after the current year's budget was done, but they raised that amount from $886 to $1,000 if we can't secure transportation for a non-public route that would be within that amount per student. Then you are required to offer them an aid in lieu payment so that they can arrange transportation themselves, and they raised that after we did last year's budget. Now it's still increased, so we have to build that into this year's budget. But we are continuing to work on rerouting, and also we are aggressively pursuing jointures with other districts where if we have transportation out of district and there's surrounding districts that are also going to those same locations that we're trying to join with them. We do some of that through the county, but we've also had some luck doing it ourselves, so we are really looking at trying to save on some costs by doing that. But in any case, we're looking at about a $298,000 increase for next year. The next couple of slides put together the capital projects and equipment that we're looking at for next year. This is an itemized list of the larger things that we're looking at. You can see that it ranges from things that are really required for safety reasons and for structural reasons, such as the stage replacement and repair at High School South, sidewalk repairs that we're looking at Bayshore and Thorne. We're looking at replacing a fence with guardrail at the back of High School South because we keep having to replace the fence and a guardrail will be more durable. There's some items in there for additional parking and for some other pavement repairs. We're also looking at some flooring replacements. The item at the bottom of the slide is looking at funds to replace for auditorium lighting and sound system at High School North. We did the lighting system over at High School South a few years ago. They need the same type of update here at High School North in addition to their sound system, so we're putting funds aside for that. We have a second page of those where we're talking about doing some other, we do district-wide painting every year, so we allocate about $40,000 to spread throughout the district for that. We have elevator replacements. As you might recall from a previous budget, we've recently done elevator replacements here at High School North and also at New Monmouth. All of our elevators are aging, so we are trying to get onto a program where we We do those elevators over a period of time because they are costly, and to do them all in 1 year would be not really feasible. We are also looking at doing a replacement of the PA system at High School South, which was mentioned on the security slide, that needs to be done, and a field maintenance and improvement program district-wide to improve the safety and the condition of our fields at the high school and secondary level. But altogether, the capital improvements that we have proposed total about $1.8 million for this year. 1.5 million of that is being funded out of our capital reserve, so the remainder of that, plus some other things like lease payments and so forth, would be funded out of our general operating budget. So just to recap our capital reserve that we've been talking about, at the end of last year, we had $9,836,000 left, net of the proposed expenditures that we have in this year's budget. So, I'm sorry, for the end of this year, we have $9,800 left after we allocate that $1.5 million toward next year's budget. So just looking forward at some of the other things that aren't specifically included in next year's budget, but that are still on the radar and do need to be funded in the future. We have been talking about doing some major renovations to the media centers here at High School North and at High School South. We are also talking about the fact that the High School North field will need replacement at some point. We did the High School South field this past summer out of our capital reserve funds, and we're looking for keeping that on the radar, that we'll have to eventually replace the High School North field as well. We also have some other items that we're looking at, the need for some additional science labs at Thompson Middle School, which we haven't gotten a price tag on, but we have identified as a need. There are some science classrooms that are being used that are not really lab classrooms, but they're being used as labs, and we do need to look at converting those. And some additional renovations that we've been talking about over at High School South to their arts wing, and the continued refresh of the bathrooms at the elementary schools. We do have some monies put aside in the upcoming budget as it's proposed, but we do need to continue that. That money will certainly not do everything that we want to do, so that's something that we're going to have to do over the next several budget cycles. So this will just give you an overview of what the various amounts of increase in the tax levy would provide to the district as far as revenue. We are allowed up to a 2% increase without the use of waivers or exceptions to that increase. So looking at a 2% increase in the tax levy, that would generate additional revenue of almost $2.8 million for next year. And we've gone through the scenarios of how that would be allocated. At a 1.5% increase, you're looking at a little over $2 million being generated over last year's budget. At 1%, you'd be looking at 1.3390, and at 0.5, you'd be looking at $695,000. And of course, no increase in the tax levy would mean no increased revenue for next year's expenditures. What we've also included here is the estimated annual or monthly tax increase for the average assessed home based upon those levels of increase in the tax levy. So based upon a 2% increase in the tax levy and the average assessed home value, which is a little over $424,000 at this point, we'd be looking at an annual increase of $169.67, or $14 a month, and you can see the progressive changes in that amount as you go through the different levels of increase in the tax levy. So at this point in time, we've been discussing with the board the proposals for next year's budget, the available revenues. We have shown you at what we have right now as far as revenue that's available to be used in the budget versus the appropriations that are being proposed. We do have right now a little over $200,000 where the revenue exceeds the appropriations, which the board has to decide how to go forward with that, and also how to go forward with the amount of the revenue that will be raised for next year's budget. The timetable for our budget process is that the DOE, the New Jersey Department of Ed, is looking for, or requiring us to approve a tentative budget to submit by March 29th. We have a voting meeting next Wednesday, which is March 28th, and if the board approves a tentative budget to submit at that time, we will submit it by March 29th to the Department of Ed for them to review and approve. They will look at it, give us any comments back, and give us hopefully their approval of that budget shortly after that. At that point in time, we can continue to look at the budget. If the board and the district wish to make any more changes to that, they certainly can. They just have to inform the Department of Ed of those changes. And the budget then goes to a public hearing and a final budget approval at the April voting meeting, which I think right now is April 25th or something around that date, which would then be at the time where we'd have a public hearing, another presentation on the budget. If the board approves it, then we would submit it for final approval, and we would submit it to the Department of Ed as final. They would sign off on it, and then it would become our final budget for next year. We have, over the past several years, there's been times where there hasn't been any changes between the tentative and the final. There's been times where we have received additional information or looked at things and we've made changes between the tentative and the final. So that just gives you an overview of how the process goes. We don't have anything more at this time. The board is still deliberating on the budget. They've been given all of this information, and we will continue to consider the priorities that have been put forth for next year's budget and come to an agreement and a proposal to submit for voting approval by the board next week for their tentative budget. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. George. Anybody else wants to comment?
I guess at this time we take questions from the public on the presentation, about maybe 10-15 minutes so we can move on. If anybody has anything to say. Come on,
It's like official public comments time?
Yeah.
About it?
About the budget, yeah.
About the budget specific. Okay, cool.
I've never filled this thing out. Am I supposed to write under every time I come up?
Well, you're supposed to vote.
Sorry. I'm Rachel Kanopka. I have 3 girls at Nassau. I really appreciate the inclusion of the security stuff in the budget. I know I saw the earlier iteration at FIC, and we had asked about that, so that it was included, I'm very happy about. And I know I emailed this all to you earlier today, but like 5 minutes probably before you had to come here. But at Nutswamp, we just did a very informal but somewhat organized survey to try to gauge parent priorities for the budget this year. So I had emailed that to you. I have a couple of copies here, but I ran out of paper, so I can give you what I have if you want to look at it. And actually, I feel like the changes you made align very well with what the people came back with in the survey, so that was great to see. There is a lot of information, a lot of meat in their open-ended responses that I think it would be great for you guys just to take a look at. It's their words, the parents who responded. We had over 100 people respond in less than 24-hour period, so it was a really remarkable response. And honestly, I think the reason I proposed doing this and kind of set the survey up was I saw how well received the middle school survey was and how many people responded to it and then how that feedback was taken so seriously. And I think people really appreciate just being asked. So it kind of helped me and the other members of the Nutswamp PTA to understand what the rest of us were saying. Because obviously, you have a couple people who attend meetings and speak up loud, but that doesn't mean you hear everybody. So this was a way to kind of get a better pulse on everybody. So again, I emailed it all to you. I'll hand over these. I only have, I think, 4 copies of the actual Google Slides thing I did.
We have the ones you emailed.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody need a hard copy?
I printed,
Okay.
Leonore printed some out.
Oh, thank you. And then the actual data set, though, is, I think, the most telling. So if you have the time, fun midnight reading, you can go through and see what people, both, the way I set up the survey, I made sure we didn't lead people. I asked open-ended first, and then after they had submitted what they thought, I said, okay, now if you had to pick from a bucket, what would it be? So I feel like we got a lot out of it. So I appreciate what you guys did with that. I guess my one question on the tentative budget submission is obviously if you vote on it next week, it goes to the state on the 29th. What if you guys don't approve it next week? What happens to the timeline with the DOE?
We would have to tell the BOE that we haven't approved the tentative budget and work with the county superintendent to come up with a timeline to approve it, but we have, we do have to keep in mind these timelines and adhere to these timelines, because the way that we raise our revenue is that the budget goes to the municipality to
And then it's
assess
to be- yeah.
real estate taxes. So it's not an indefinite process. If we don't approve by the timeline, we're going to have to explain to the county superintendent why we didn't approve, and they're going to need to know from us, what our plan is to get the budget approved, to get to them to look at and review so that we can move forward with the rest of the timeline.
Okay, I was just curious. It seems quick. That's the only point that I'm making. I know I got to see this at PIC because I happen to be the PIC rep for Not Swamp, so I kind of had a heads up and I was able to digest this a little bit. So I saw an earlier version of this. Most of the people here tonight, this is the first time they're seeing it, and realizing how critical it is and the timeline that you guys have to work within. Maybe in future years, and I don't even know how you would do this because the state aid numbers just came in on Thursday. So I know it's kind of, you're getting crunched on both ends, so that makes it very hard. But even just something like this survey that I did for Nut Swamp, which honestly, I texted the PTA president over the weekend and whipped it up and we sent it out yesterday. It was very much a scramble. It wasn't very organized or thought out in advance. But I think if there was a way for the district to do that on a broader level next year, anticipating the tentative budget proposal and maybe solicit some feedback earlier from the parents so that when you guys are going into coming up with your numbers, you have that same kind of finger on the pulse of the rest of the parents in the district, not just this one school, because obviously I recognize this isn't necessarily going to apply across all 17 schools. I think that would be well received by the public, and it would help them feel like they really are a part of the process during development as opposed to responding to it after it's been put down on paper, if that makes sense.
I do want to say, though, that we have been talking about components of this budget really since last fall. There's been facilities things have been talked about. There's been personnel items have been talked about. There's, we had a whole presentation last month on the area of benefits. This is not really the first time where a lot of these components have been presented.
Oh no,
we have been working on pulling it all together as a cohesive package for next year, but we have been very deliberate as far as discussing with the board, really I think starting like last October for components of this budget. So I know Dr. Thorpe wants to.
Yeah, go ahead.
As well. We got 12 hours of meetings with four meetings, 3 hours each. This whole process for us begins in September when we start meeting with building level administrators, supervisors, directors. There's communication as far as from what each school community wants. We get that in our meetings when we have sit-downs with each one of our 17 principals. We begin to build that budget process, and as that evolves, we on a monthly basis in January, I think first of December, January, February, and then our last meeting last Thursday have met as we are progressing with that budget. So it's a very comprehensive process that involves all stakeholders. Plus, as you know, being a member of PIC, we have those monthly about 4 to 5 hour meetings with parent information. That's kind of an open line of communication where the central office administrative team, Ms. Gallagher and myself, are readily available for PIC, not to mention our monthly administrative council meetings. So as far as having a finger on your pulse, to quote your words, that's something that we work hard to do on.
Okay. No, and I appreciate that. I didn't want in any way mean to discredit the time and effort that's gone into it.
But a survey is not a bad idea. I'm not discrediting the idea of a survey. I think that's a good idea, and that's something we can consider in the future. So
great.
So thanks for
I appreciate that. I think many members of the general public, the ones who aren't sitting here tonight and the ones who aren't in PIC, they aren't as involved in the process and don't feel kind of, and it's obviously by their own choice. They're not here tonight. I'm not making excuses for that. I think there's an opportunity for the district to do more outreach to solicit feedback as opposed to waiting for people to show up, and then it might just make the community feel more involved in general and avoid potential, butting of heads at the 11th hour when they've been asked at the 2nd hour, for example, just to give a general idea of what they're focused on. That's all I was trying to say. But I do appreciate all the time and effort that went into this, and I know I mean, it must have been, just the amount of time I've spent seeing you present it, it must be, 0.11, 0.01% of the time you spent working on it, and I know that's been a lot. So I appreciate what everybody's done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a question. Sorry.
Hi, my name's Jen Rosen. I have 2 children at Nassau. My question is, the first part is thank you all for doing what you do. I know we were talking about adding 1 more guidance counselor for Thompson, but I think in light of everything that's going on, we might want to consider additional counselors being a better idea. I love the idea of the SSOs. I think law enforcement is great. However, my question is, if they're retired law enforcement, does that mean that we're going to be paying into their pensions? What happens with benefits? If they don't have any type of weapon, then what's kind of the difference between them and just a retired elderly person running around if the school gets breached? I think the doors and the upgrades are great, but my question is who'd be hiring them? What are their qualifications? Who'd be in charge of what their competencies would be? How would that be assessed? Would it be annually, biannually? What type of physical makeup are we looking for these people to be able to do? You had mentioned that they're going to be working with the teachers and working with administration, but what does that mean? It's a little bit too vague for me for $500,000 of the budget to not have the kind of steps and the stepwise hiring process that we're going to be looking for. And the other part is, have you guys considered something independent, an independent either workforce to coordinate stuff? I appreciate the upgraded PA system, and that in collaboration with increasing the door security and vestibules or whatever you guys are working on, seems smart. I'm just a little bit concerned about the retired aspect, and then what would happen if we had to deal with something. Can you guys talk about that at all?
Sure.
Okay.
Said a lot.
I know. I tried to do it slow, so for me that was slow.
I'm just organizing in my mind where I'm going to start. So we'll start with why retired, please. So the board did look and was presented with options of different levels of coordination with the police department. So SRO would be one of those, and other options. In the future, it's going to be a shared service topic for us to discuss in the future. There are different levels of there are special 3s, special 2s, SROs. They could all be carrying concealed or hip weapons on the side. The board reviewed that. We discussed that. We didn't feel that, we felt we were taking a large number of steps as we have in the past. Just in our last previous budget, we made tremendous improvements at more than $1 million to our surveillance systems and our video security, which will be part of what already we have a significant number of people that are retired police officers that are trained, retired, experienced police officers, and that is to answer your one question, a much different level of expertise than having somebody who is not trained, is not a trained professional in law enforcement.
I think a trained professional, I don't mean to cut you off, but I realized that I just did. I think a trained law enforcement professional is fantastic. I think they add a value. My question is on the qualification, the age, and the fitness. We're talking about people who are retired for a reason. Some people retire at 40 because they've been 20 years on the force, and other people retire at 65.
Right.
And they both carry different,
Right. So that would be a competitive process like it is any position. They would be, to answer your next question, they would be hired by the board. SSOs are hired by the board. SROs are hired by the police department. Class 2s, Class 3s, hired by the police department. SSOs hired by the board. We have a great working relationship with our local police department, and police, as compared to teachers, retire at an earlier age because the eligibility for service is an earlier age. So we found that there's a significant number of, to this point, people that are available. Part of the reason the number is as high as it is because we're going to pay more money because we know this is going to be a very competitive process, which brings me to your next point. We have met with the Superintendent's County Roundtable. We have met with and got feedback by the Monmouth County Police Chiefs Association, came in and spoke to us. There was concern about outside agencies as opposed to working directly with local police enforcement. They cautioned us in using any outside agencies, and if we were to consider to please work through your police department and vet that. In Middletown, with the strong working relationship we have with our police department, we think that the best way for us to continue to build on the number that we already have is to work directly with the police chief and our local police department and surrounding police departments. In the past, when we've hired positions, we've actually, in the hiring process, brought in to sit in the interview process with us, members of our local police department. So that would be a coordinated effort.
That's what I was looking for. I was like, although you guys all seem really nice, and I read about everybody.
No, it's not our expertise.
Exactly. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Becky Soden from the AFC. One question, I'll start with one question that had to do with the same topic. We're doing all this security to give us peace of mind that our kids are going to be safe in school. And just to provide more peace of mind, I'm really curious to know what it is that an SSO can do if something terrible happens in the school. What are they actually physically able to do to stop that and protect our kids?
Well, the training and expertise that they've had all the way from the identifying of potential harm and also maintaining, as we put, a hardened front is key to why we're looking to train retired police enforcement.
So is the hardened front something like a deterrent? Is that the concept of that term, hardened front?
Yeah, just having the ability to see and understand and identify things that the untrained eye would not see, to be able to use that $1.2 million of additional video security cameras, as well as continuous ongoing training that we regularly coordinate and train with Chief Weber and Lieutenant Terafenko, who's the the direct liaison, working with Mr. McGuire and Mr. White to coordinate those trainings. But there's a level of expertise and understanding that these events we review so far in a short time of this new year, the 4 specific events as they relate. And Mr. McGuire not only does he review that with the security staff, but with the administrative team, and we collaborate on that, and then we actually meet with the police, fire, township administrator, discuss our drills, what we're doing in preparation based on other events, how we would handle them, how we would plan for them, and how we would move forward. So it's, that collaboration and that expertise can be utilized to communicate, to present a harder front, and also to communicate very quickly with local law enforcement to cut down that time in response. That response time is really important to us. We're doing everything we can to train and prepare to cut down on that response time.
And do we have the confidence that there's a good possibility that an SSO could stop someone who came into the building after they got past they weren't identified as a potential threat, they got past the hardened front, they're there, they're doing what they're doing that we don't want them doing, and is there a potential SSO could physically stop someone?
I can't speak to every situation
Yeah.
because every
But
situation
do we think it's possible
is
that they
different.
could? Are we hiring them because we think it's possible they could?
I think they provide for us the best opportunity to do that.
And then, on the Navesink trailers, I see in the budget is removal of modular. Is that the final decision on what's going to happen to Navesink?
That's where the board is at this time.
Okay. And if, being that's the decision, it just occurred to me that you're cutting out bathrooms, after bathrooms that are available to the school. Are there going to be additional bathrooms provided? Because the bathrooms are in the trailers. Bathrooms for half of the children are in the trailers. So you take the trailers out, you take out the bathrooms. Now there's only one set of bathrooms for each gender.
Well, there's 2 bathrooms in the trailers, one male and one female at the very beginning of the entranceway, on the right and on the left. So you're cutting down the number of total classrooms. You are also cutting down one male and one female bathroom. There is not at this time plan for an addition of the number of bathrooms that we currently had, nor is there a need for that based on the number of students and the population in the school at this time.
And I guess there's some guidelines for students, bathroom availability per student, and Navesink meets that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we're returning the school to its original footprint so that it's built under the specifications that were required for those classrooms.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, except depending on what the population is. But that's all, I
Well, as long as the classrooms are not housing more than what's specified under DOE guidelines, which they just be, then it would still be appropriate.
Okay, all right, that's good. And just 2 requests for future considerations. I know I already mentioned this to you, but if you are considering redoing bathrooms, like the elementary bathrooms, was this something, a future thing?
Yes.
I just want to keep putting out there and pushing for the sinks to be in the hallways so that there can be more frequent hand washing and you are not washing your hands and then touching a dirty bathroom door to get out. That would be fabulous. Sinks perhaps with foot pedals or automatic sinks or something, because there's altogether too much sickness going around. And one thing that was just discussed today, the firemen visit the elementary schools a lot. Is it possible to have the policemen do that as well, so that children aren't in such fear of the policemen?
I want to say that the police are regularly inside and outside our buildings. Just the other day, when I was doing my tours, I was at Fairview. There was a police car parked in the parking lot, and this regularly happens in any one of our 17 buildings, where they're actually encouraged at points during the day. A lot of people don't understand that, they think that there's a number of, however many number of police officers are, let's say that's 90, right? That there are 90 police officers on during the day, but there are multiple shifts through the 24 hours, and when they're available, when they're not tied up with traffic or other things, they regularly, under the police administration, Chief Weber and Lieutenant Terafenko and all of them, the police officers are encouraged to come and to the schools. But on top of that, there's actually education programs that happen at the school. I'm going to turn over to you.
It's a 10-week program that we used to do with our 5th grade students, and they're in the building much of that time because they do multiple classes. They don't put them all together. So, I mean, if there's 2, 3, 4, 5 5th grade classrooms, they're in there for 10-week periods at a time to teach these students. So they're regularly in there.
Do they stop into the, especially the younger kids, the kindergartens and 1st graders, do they stop in and say hi and introduce themselves and let them know what they do? And
Well, they do programs in the elementary school, like,
they'll
Joe,
do-
you were at the program
Yeah.
with the cane, I believe.
Yes,
At
Port Martin, yeah.
Yes, they also do that in Nut Swamp, they do that in other schools as well. But to your point, encouraging as many of those type of events as possible for that community policing. I think that's something that our police department is really good at in Middletown. But in today's time, to your point, in this changing time in society, it's important to do as much of that as possible. I
yeah, I
understand.
mean, I don't know personally exactly what goes on. I got the idea from a discussion that it wasn't, but whatever can be encouraged and expanded would be fabulous.
Definitely talk
And
to
the
your
police are open to
PTA,
that.
Because
I'm
I
sorry.
was gonna say, definitely talk to your PTA, because our PTA does events, like we talked about the K-9 unit come, read across America, we had the new police officers come in and read some kids and.
Yes, police officers come in.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
If there's any opportunity-
And Mayor Murray comes with the, actually with the K-9 unit too, has come to some of the schools. So we encourage the township committee, the police, firemen. Firemen do a lot in our schools as well. But building on those things as it relates to improving upon that relationship with the police, so we see something, say something, you know, are comfortable in communicating in that moment is important. I agree.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I just have a question about, I'm confused with the security in the
Could you
schools.
please state your name?
Sure, Mary Ellen Chappelle, Middletown Village, Thompson, and Sam. I have a retired police officer husband who worked in New York. I have to say the security in the schools in New Jersey is much better than it is in New York City. 100 times better. But given the school shooting that happened today, an armed security guard took out a shooter and there was only one fatality versus 20, 40, whatever it could have been. So can you clarify is there somebody armed, concealed carry in the school that something happened? My husband worked in very, very tough neighborhoods in New York City, but he can't stop a bullet with his fingers if somebody's shooting, and it's only so much that person can do. So
We are not having armed concealed carry at this time. The steps that we are taking and the process we are going through creates the opportunity for that in the future. If that's the direction over time we look to go, understand that over the last couple of years, our Board of Education has taken significant, expensive steps and improvement. This in itself is, you know, $500,000.
locked doors, I mean, compared to New York, you can walk in and you have a 65-year-old woman sitting there unarmed. So I mean, it's much better. But knowing, you know, if you had a regular security guard that was armed, they're not trained. When you have a police officer, especially one who worked in Newark, you know, Brooklyn, New York, you know, the Camden, those guys are trained at bullets flying at them and not even shooting back and getting somebody apprehended. And I understand that they're trained. However, when somebody comes in, handgun, they can stop them. If somebody comes in with an AR-15, they can't stop them. And that's what's coming into the schools. So without them having a firearm, there's only so much somebody can do.
The point that I was making is that I completely understand what you're saying. That's a conversation going on throughout the county. We're in regular meetings with the prosecutor's office, with the county chiefs, with the Department of Education. On Monday, I'm attending a meeting with the head of security for the state of New Jersey. These are ongoing conversations. What we're doing is building an infrastructure that is more than what we've had in the past, with video cameras, with additional people, but hiring at a rate where we have a better chance increasing that rate in that special position of the SSO, so that we can get those retired experts to work within our district. Is there going to be a time in the future where they're going to be armed? That remains
I
to be
think,
seen.
well, my personal opinion and a lot of other moms and dads out there, including our husband who's in law enforcement, time is now. We just had a shooting today. And you know what? There was one fatality, which is one fatality too much. But that guy was taken out by a security guard who was trained to take that person out. And in New Jersey, it's very hard to get a carry permit. You really have to be a retired law enforcement, FBI, somebody. So you have very highly trained people already that can only carry. You don't have, you know, any Tom walking around with a concealed carry. These are very trained people. So I think you should reconsider having somebody that armed, that's very trained in the school. I don't agree with teachers being armed, but at least one guy, one officer. And, you know, I ask to reconsider that.
Okay, thank you for your perspective. Appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Of course, I forgot my glasses, so I'm trying to do this. Sue Griffin, thank you, Amy. This was a really good presentation. Thank you. Now I can see what I'm reading. Really good presentation.
I feel you.
We're the same stuff.
I know.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to us about the guidance counselor in Thompson. It's new to this year, and I appreciate that, as do a lot of other people. One thing that was missing that I didn't hear, and maybe it's just me not hearing it, I didn't hear anything about the pension assessment. Can you speak to that a little bit?
We are including the second payment on the pension assessment for the early retirement incentive that the state assessed us a couple of years ago. It's $763,000. It's included in this year's budget. We've included it in next year's budget as well.
Okay, so we will have 1.4 million done at the end of this year.
That would be the first 2 years of billings, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then the other thing, can you give us an idea as to what percentages are being batted around at this point, or is that just a conversation that we're going to have to stay tuned until next week for?
Percentages of tax levy increase?
Yes.
Well, the budget, the appropriations that we have presented as being considered are based on a 2% increase in levy, but we do have a couple $100,000 that would be considered unallocated. So upon discussions with the board, that could either be put back to reduce the tax levy, it could be used to allocate toward additional appropriations. The board is still deliberating on that.
So the board is looking at a 2% and then something slightly below.
Well, no, the board is still looking at the proposed budget and deciding which direction it wants to go.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, I don't want to speak on what the
No,
board
I think she's just looking for what you saw tonight was about 1.8. Isn't that what we talked?
Well,
With that $200,000 about like 1.8
2%
change.
minus the $200,000 that we haven't used to allocate toward any appropriations, that may be roughly 1.8. But, the board has not come to a final decision on that.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you everybody for your comments on the budget.
Joan, I'm sorry. Am I allowed to come up again? Is that like totally procedurally inappropriate? Okay. I have my notebook now.
This isn't going by procedure, so go ahead.
Okay, all right. I just had a couple of quick questions that were specific to the presentation. First question, on the SSOs, will they also be actually signing visitors in, or will they just be kind of standing and watching the people go by? Will they be tasked with saying, give me your license, write you down, where are you going, or does that still happen by the secretaries in the main office? Or has that been figured out yet?
Procedurally, that is still to be worked out with, as the duties are assigned. I don't want to speak on behalf of the principals and of Mr. McGuire. And procedures that are in
the time, but not all the time, because
Yeah.
his job won't be just to be the.
Yes, that was my question. So he's not stationed at the front entrance the entire time, he's circulating the building theoretically?
To make sure they're securing that.
That would be a good portion of it, but we'll have rounds.
Okay.
There'll be appropriate times for that, but
Okay.
there'll also be appropriate times to make sure, as we said earlier, that the perimeter is secure and that there is the appropriate opportunity to monitor all areas.
Okay, no, that was my question. Thank you.
And where the security guard was at any given time might not be something we share with the public.
Yeah.
Exactly where he is and what is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then, okay, this is jumping totally. The state aid number you had in there was about 500,000. When I read an article, I had no idea if it's apples to apples, it looked like 800,000 for Middletown. So I was just wondering what the discrepancy was.
The discrepancy is that the state is comparing our state aid number for the current year as it was
before the adjustment of 300. Got it.
56,000.
Got it.
We are not counting that as an increase since we already.
That was just that was a win back.
Yes.
Yes, got it. And that makes sense. The next question, and this is me not being a finance person. The media center, $2 million that was in there as part of a kind of future project capital reserve. I think it was
1 million.
Oh, it was 1 million. I thought not 1 million each.
No, a future, but originally we were looking at allocating $1 million for this year's budget, but we reallocated that.
Okay, so I guess that's my question, that there isn't an immediate plan to use money next year for media center improvements in the high schools? But it's a future maybe?
No, what the plan is to come up with a more concrete plan of what that would require and to come up with a more concrete budget for the 2 media centers that we would be looking at doing.
Okay.
But we are looking at putting funds toward the development of the conceptual plan.
Got it. So
Yes.
construction won't happen next year, but planning will. So,
No,
okay.
Construction was never going to happen this
Okay.
summer. We really were looking toward, it was a multi-million-dollar investment, so we were looking to fund that over time.
Okay.
At this point in time, we're looking to just accomplish planning and then put future monies toward the execution.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
We reallocated some of those monies toward other things such as the improvement to the High School North Auditorium and things like that.
Okay. This is kind of a small one, but I wrote it down. I saw with the refresh of the Chromebooks that happens every year, obviously there's probably, hundreds, if not thousands, every year that we're kind of getting rid of as we replace them. What happens to those? Are they donated? Do we give them to kids in the district who might not have a Chromebook at home so they can do their homework at home on it?
Different things. Some are held as reserves for Chromebooks that break and so forth. Some are switched out for older Chromebooks that aren't part of the one-to-one initiative that will replace. Others we do actually dispose of, trade in, get money back.
Okay.
When we purchase new ones, we do trade in a certain amount of old ones too and get credit toward those.
Okay.
Variety of
Yeah, if there's an opportunity to donate them somewhere if they're still usable, I just think that would be great.
Well, our first responsibility is obviously to the
Yeah, to
taxpayers
the
of our
district,
town.
yeah.
So if we can reuse them within the district or get a credit for the future purchase, that's our first priority.
Okay. And then my last question, I know you guys have been scheduling and maybe even doing some of the tours of the facilities to kind of assess the level of overcrowdedness, et cetera. And I didn't see anything specific in the budget about potential structural improvements or facilities changes to accommodate, the incoming students for next year, for example, at Thompson. Is there, I guess my first question is, where do the site visits stand? And is there an opportunity if you guys decide after seeing them in person, okay, we need to actually do something about this right now, this is not going to last another year, how could the budget be adjusted before the final budget gets approved?
The site visits are scheduled to start in April. At this point in time, being that we're at the end of March, the window for having major construction done on schools is really not available to plan and do something major for the beginning of September. So at this point, if we were going to be looking at something like that, it would be when we're asked.
So the principal at Thompson feels comfortable enough knowing what numbers are coming in, because now it's pretty concrete, that they can make it work for a year, even with the schedule changes, et cetera. So there's no kind of immediate, there's literally not enough.
For Dr. George, but yes.
Yeah, Kim, do you want to talk about the things that we've
So the one area where we do have some concern is the science labs, and
Okay,
that's why
and
that's
that was on
included in
there.
the budget.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, the revised middle school schedule is going to help alleviate some of the overcrowding and use of the gymnasium for physical education classes. So that's going to help because that was an area where we had significant concerns.
Okay.
But the incoming class of 6th graders is slightly smaller than the exiting class of
It is,
8th graders, so that helps too.
Okay.
But I want to be clear that even though we've identified the science labs as a need, we are not looking that construction will be done during this coming summer. At the earliest, it would be done during the summer of 2019.
Okay.
Right.
Understood. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on with our committee of the whole. How are we going to do this, Dr. George, when the people aren't here? Are we just going to?
We have reports from them.
Okay. We'll start with technology.
AKA tonight. The first thing under technology was the student Chromebook incentive that has been started at Thompson this past month. It was done to further reduce the number of damages to the Chromebooks that are issued to students while also replenishing the spare pool that is maintained at every school. The incentive rewarded students who took very good care of their device during the time that they've had it. Teachers recommended students who have older devices that are in very good or immaculate condition. The district then verified that these students did not have any damage requests to that device while they had ownership of it. Once that was verified, the students were given a new Chromebook to use while the older one was added to the spare pool. The new devices were taken from the small new spare pool that we've had for new students who've come into the district during the school year, as well as those that were being used for replacement devices. Building administration and staff have reported that the students have had a positive response, and many others have begun to take notice among the students and are asking how they can take place in the exchange incentive as well. So we're looking to grow that into some of the other secondary schools as well. Definitely a worthwhile incentive. With regard to preparation for WIDA and DRC and park testing and technology, on Monday, March 12th, the district began WIDA testing for all of our ESL students in a number of our elementary schools. Those would be the magnet schools of Navesink, Middletown Village, and Fairview. A few weeks prior to that testing, we had configured our WIDA testing server as well as our DRC provided application on the Chromebooks that the students use to ensure that it was a success. Testing will continue until April 13th for those ESL students. We have now moved focus to what will be our last park testing, may well be our last park testing, if you read the news. Mr. Manella and Mr. Siwiak attended the state-administered park seminar 2 weeks ago. They were provided with the changes that are relevant for this year. The district is now in the process of building out testing cache servers for each school and configuring the new TestNav app on all of our students' Chromebooks. On Thursday, March 29th, the district will be conducting a park infrastructure trial. That's what we do every year to make sure that there's good connectivity and there's no issues when the students go to log on. The purpose of the infrastructure trial is also to test that the cache servers work with the app and in the kiosk mode on all the devices, and that we have no problems with our network. Many times we have to put devices in place to kind of expand internet access in certain locations of the school. The real park testing is scheduled to begin on April 16th and conclude around May 25th. Like we did last year, we will be posting for our Middletown Summer Technology Assistant Internship positions. Those are for our high school students. This will be the second year of that program. The Summer Technology Internship is open to students in grades 8 through 12 and runs on half days for 6 weeks throughout the summer. Some of the tasks that the interns will be completing while working alongside with our district technology staff include repairing, cleaning, and reassigning the existing student-used Chromebooks, unboxing, configuring, and assigning new Chromebooks as part of the refresh cycle, and decommissioning end-of-life Chromebooks.
Does he say how many interns he's going to take?
I believe we're looking to 8. I believe we're looking to increase it.
I think it's good.
We're also looking at rebuilding elementary Chromebook carts this summer with these interns, re-imaging the computer labs in the elementary and secondary schools, reconnecting all district hardware following, like when the custodians go in and clean the classrooms, all that equipment has to be reconnected, and then upgrading, repairing, and inventorying district equipment. While completing this internship, these interns will gain the following skill sets or experience: knowledge of different types of hardware and software, a great hands-on technical learning experience, exposure to new and possibly unfamiliar technologies, access to behind the scenes, the real-world connection of what they learn in classrooms with regard to technology, and knowledge of how the technology works independently and together in a large school district. The application for the internship will be posted later this month, and then Mr. Siwiak and his team of technicians will conduct interviews.
May I ask a question? The interns that are coming in, are they seniors?
No, they can be any student grades 8 through 12.
Okay. Do you think that we could interview the seniors that are leaving that were interns last year? So like almost like an exit interview to find out where they think we can improve the program.
We kind of actually already did that, which is why we're increasing the positions and increasing the responsibilities. We talked about this at our technology meeting earlier this month with myself and Dr. George, Ms. Gallagher, Mr. Siwiak, and Mr. Alston. It's also the reason why we're going to be reconfiguring or redesigning their workday to get more out of them because some of the tasks are, they require high concentration, and some of the students reported that the longer day kind of didn't have them at their optimal best at all times. So they're looking to restructure the schedule.
Another thing, are they only going to be working on, I don't know if this, you say Chromebooks, but what about Apple products?
All types of devices.
Because last year, did they only work on Chromebooks?
No, they also reconfigure the labs, which contain Apple products, as well as traditional PC desktops units.
Okay.
And the iPads too, they work with, so.
Just as long as they can be well-rounded and we hear what they have to say, because
Yeah.
they're our best source of information.
Yeah.
Student voice.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Why don't you just keep going?
Okay, I'll keep going.
Otherwise, she'll get up, then I'll get up, then she'll get up.
Some handouts from Mrs. Caruso and Mr. Kerrigan.
So we're down to
Handouts, we're down to
curriculum, right?
curriculum, yes.
And then you're gonna come up and do student services, right? this fall?
I'll do student services and student activities.
Okay.
And then Amy
And then Amy will do the,
facilities and finance.
so while we're up there, yeah.
So in our, while you're collecting those papers, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the update on quarterly assessments for our high school courses. That also includes 8th grade algebra and some of our higher level world language courses in the 8th grade. So we have already had at least, I want to say, 3 assessment committee meetings this year. We were actually scheduled to have our next meeting tomorrow, which obviously we're going to have to reschedule. Yeah. We're going to have to reschedule that. But we've been having really great meetings with our staff of all departments, 8th grade, high school staff, teachers, special education staff, and administrators. And we've been revisiting, as we always do, reflecting on our assessment practices in the district, taking into consideration the assessments that are given from the state, along with other things, other types of assessments that we administer, like the PSAT to our 10th graders, and our iReady assessments at the middle school level, and also our district quarterlies that are assigned to the high school courses. So below you can see is the summary of where we're at so far this year, based on those conversations with those committee members. For the remainder of the 17-18 school year, we're going to look to continue along with some of the changes we implemented last year. With regard to in the mathematics courses, we're going to continue to give the current existing 3rd marking period district quarterlies for Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and Pre-Calculus, as a lot of the information that we glean from those assessments helps teachers make adjustments to instruction with regard to high-stake tests like ARC and SAT. They will be administered during the last week of the marking period. However, they will take place during the regular class time, with the dates for each subject decided by the teachers of those courses within each school, as opposed to a prescribed quarterly schedule. They will continue to be weighted at 20%. The other math courses will use their own 20% weighted assessment or project-based type assessment for their 3rd marking period like we did last year. Kind of takes the pressure off of preparing for a traditional paper and pencil type exam. In the social studies and the English departments, there was strong recommendation from the staff to keep 3rd marking period project-based assessments that were created and collaborated on by both departments last year for the 3rd marking period. And they will also continue to collaborate on creating 4th marking period project-based assessments during upcoming PLC days. In science, we're going to continue to use the 3rd and 4th marking period quarterlies this year. A lot of that is due to the fact of the implementation and the emergence of the new state science assessment, which is much more cumulative in nature of the types of science courses they take over their high school career. But we are going to be looking at building in more project-based assessments in the future. Our next meetings, that again, like tomorrow, which will be rescheduled, are going to be focused on additional ways we can make changes to the administration of these district quarterlies in the 18-19 school year. Teachers are also, in keeping with talking about student voice, teachers have been encouraged to go back and also talk to students to get student perspective and feedback as well. And our administrators have been also having those conversations. The last item under curriculum as information is that as we've discussed in prior meetings, we've been piloting and have met numerous times over the course of the year with the pilot committee for the middle school mathematics committee. Under the supervision of John Kerrigan, our director of mathematics K-12, the committee is recommending the adoption of big ideas as the new middle school math program for use in all 3 of our middle schools in all 3 grade levels, effective September 2018. This will replace the current program known as Digits that our students are using and have been using for the past 6 years. The Digits program was the first all-digital program used in our schools and had many innovative features that have served us well. However, as technology has continued to evolve, many more programs are now available that offer additional benefits. Big Ideas is one of these programs and was selected by the committee after careful consideration of many different options. The pilot teachers have been pleased with the level of engagement and understanding demonstrated by their students during this school year while using this program. Mr. Kerrigan and Mrs. Caruso will be providing more information regarding the recommendation for this new adoption of Big Ideas at our committee meeting for curriculum on April 9th, as well as our next month's board meetings. And that accounts for some of the increased funds that have been requested under curriculum for next year's budget. The adoption of a major math program for all 3 grade levels in mathematics is what we would consider more of a major adoption that you don't usually see year to year. Okay. And there's some additional information there that we'll discuss again later, just as some of the additional benefits of the program. Any questions? Thank you.
I'll be Mr. Dunn tonight. On the agenda, there's a proclamation for Autism Awareness Day and Autism Awareness Month. Mr. Dunn is going to send you information on some of the activities that are going to be going on during the month, such as a mini walkathon and an essay contest. There's a lot of activities that are going on, so he's going to send you that email. He's also going to send you information on the Dare to Dream program. There's the usual voting agendas, the approval items, the approval of home instruction, out-of-district placements. There's also a resolution for approval for the breakfast and lunch programs at district placements. This isn't at a cost to the district, but Amy, I believe it's something we have to put on to have that available for the students.
It's what they request us to put on, it's part of their
Okay. As far as student activities go, Mrs. Pickett's already talked about the park readiness. I mean, we already, in addition to the infrastructure and everything, all the student uploads, the accommodations, and the sections are already all set up. So we're pretty much ready to roll. We just have to do that infrastructure trial on the 29th. The other item that's on for student activities is a revision of the marking period schedules. We had 3 snow days already and 1 coming up tomorrow. We'd already revised the second marking period and we extended that by 3 days. So that cut into the 3rd marking period. And because those days get put on to the end of the year, the 4th marking period, which was already longer, got extended. So as of today, before even tomorrow, the 2nd marking period was down to 42 days and the 4th marking period was up to 54 days. So we're going to adjust that by 4 days. We always keep it even for the block scheduling, the A-B day, so that everybody gets at least to see the students the same amount of time. So we're going to extend the 3rd marking period by 4 days, and then depending on how it goes up until the board meeting, we will also adjust the end of the school year date too. But I can't tell you exactly what that's going to be at this time, but we'll get that. But hopefully by the board meeting there won't be any more snow after that.
Well, definitely before June 30th.
Please, I'm hoping by this board meeting. And that's about it for me and Mr. Dunn.
The rest of us see me.
Okay. As far as the ESIP solar project update, we did open up 2 rounds of bids just this afternoon for the HVAC and the electrical, the lighting upgrade projects that are part of the ESIP. We have not had a chance to evaluate all those bids, but I will tell you just from the numbers that we received, and we literally opened them up at 3:30 and 4 o'clock this afternoon, that overall we have bids that will work within the budget of our ESIP project, so we will be able to move forward. We will be for approval by the board next week. But again, since we were going to just open up this afternoon, we have to review the paperwork and the numbers and the alternates and so forth. But we were happy that we did get a decent amount of participation on both bids. So that was good news this afternoon. And that's really, if we can hopefully award those next week, and then we'll award on what those bids are, what we are awarding, then we will be able to start moving forward this summer with the installation of those measures as part of the recent project. All I have now, but I will update the board when we have the final bids that are going to be awarded next week. Okay. As far as finance goes, we do have several items. We have we will have the tentative proposed 18-19 budget, as we discussed earlier, on the agenda for next week for the board to approve. We'll have our financial reports for the month of February and the list. We will have one transportation contract revision for a parent contract for transportation. We will have renewals of our ACES supply contracts. ACES, for those who aren't aware, that's the state level cooperative that we participate in along with most other school districts for the purchase of electricity and gas, and they've asked to memorialize our participation in those bids for the next 5 years. That is based upon our usage, so anything that would be altered in the electricity side with our implementation of solar panels and so forth would be reflected in our demand that we would put out the bid for. We also are recommending photography services contract renewal with no increase, and that's not something that the district pays, that's something that the students pay as purchasing of their pictures. But we, every year, go out and we ask the principals about their satisfaction and so forth. And not them, they've given us satisfactory feedback and no increase in price. And as part of our renewal process through the E-rate process of our internet services, we, in case you're not aware, we do access our internet through two separate providers. We don't put all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. We have two providers, so if one provider for some reason goes down, we can rely on the other one. Both of those contracts we're looking at renewing for, are looking at renewal options for next year, and they've gone out through the E-rate process. We're going to be renewing half of our bandwidth through a statewide cooperative, the Educational Services Commission of New Jersey, and they have a statewide cooperative, and that will be half of our bandwidth. The other half is going out through our E-rate process, and we'll be looking to get that contract on the agenda for next week. So in both of those cases, and as we've seen over the past several years, we've been able to increase our bandwidth each time for a lesser price. It just becomes cheaper and cheaper to buy at. So we will have those numbers for the board before we do the agenda for next week. And those are the items that are on the finance.
But we're definitely looking to increase our access, right?
We will increase our bandwidth, yeah. Like I said, it becomes cheaper and cheaper every time. That's why we normally don't like to go for really long-term contracts, because it becomes, like TV sets, it becomes cheaper and cheaper. Oh, and policies, we just have the scholarship fund policy on for second reading. We had the first reading last month. But that's, I know we've had heavy policy months last month, and that's the only one that's going to be out for this month.
Is that local policy that's being changed in it?
I'm sorry?
What's being changed in the policy, is that normal in most school districts? Basically, they're changing who they're giving the checks.
But basically, it's allowing us to give checks for, instead of directly to the college, to the student to use for academic expenses. It does, there are many districts that do it that way. It really does allow for them to use the funds for other things besides tuition. It allows them to use it for books and so forth, and just cuts back on one of the bureaucratic layers to get them to get the funds to them. Our goal is to get the funds to them to use. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it does get hung up with they don't give us the information, and we have to contact the schools, and it's processing it and matching it to their tuition. This way the students get the money and they can either apply it to their tuition, or, as we all know, there's many other expenses related to going to school besides tuition. And sometimes these scholarships are, you know, not that they're little, but, you know, when you're looking at, you know, 500, 700, you know, you can easily spend that amount on books and things like that. So we want to give the students the flexibility to do that.
Okay, and that would be with all the scholarships, like?
Yes, it would allow us to do that with all the scholarships.
Okay. Thank you.
We want to get the funds to the students faster, that's the main goal.
Okay, we already did personnel. So we did old business, new business. There's just one thing though. Dr. George and I talked to Dan Alston about having a link where the community could sign up to get an email that the agenda is listed. I believe he's going to come next week and talk about that, right? Because we didn't set it up yet because there was a glitch and he was looking into something else to maybe make it better. So, so we didn't have to do it twice. So he's going to discuss that at next week's board meeting, and hopefully he'll have the tutorial up there after that, and everybody could sign up, and then when the agenda hits the website, you'll be notified that it's there. And you can just click and link onto it. So, yeah.
Mrs. Minuis, I did forward you the email. They were asking again about the delegates for the assembly.
Oh, yes. Somebody said last month that they wanted to go. I thought it was Pam or Robin. Pam. So I guess, I don't know, Robin, if you want to go. If you don't, I'll go with Pam, but we should really send 2 people.
Okay.
Okay. We'll
There's a
sign.
delegate and an alternate.
So we'll sign Robin. Who wants to be the, one of you can be the voter and one of you could be the silent partner.
Don't we get a vote on what the vote on?
Yeah, but we don't have it yet. We have to just send who we're going to send, and then the information comes to us. So.
We have to relay back to the board.
Yeah, well, first, what you're going to do, she's going to sign you up, and then Delegates Assembly will send us the voting issues, and you will share it with the whole board. The whole board will give you how they want you to vote, and the majority is how you vote.
But if I remember correctly, when Mrs. Griffin did it, if someone persuades you,
right,
different than the board has given you the opportunity. We'll tell you how we think you should vote, but if somebody persuades you otherwise, you have the right to vote however you think we would want you to.
And I think and I think we could reiterate that once we get the information and we have a discussion at the as the board before you go to that meeting, and then give you the whole thing that you could. If somebody persuades you for a good reason, you can change it.
You'll get the topics. You'll be able to solicit feedback from the board. I think the Delegates Assembly is May 19th.
Yes.
Like the third Saturday in May or something.
And it's usually a couple hours. You're done by 12. You have to be there by 8:30 usually, and you're done by 12. So thank you for signing up for that.
Sure.
And okay, I think we're pretty much we're up to public comment. If there's no more new or old business, anybody from the public would like to make a comment on any issue?
My name is Karen Diaz. I had a question. At the security meeting at Thompson this past week, someone had brought up, it started with the power outage and the internet that was out based on the accident. But there was also a current concern, someone had mentioned, that there are specific areas within the building in Thompson that does not have cell service or good internet service. My question is there enough comfort level with, in case of an emergency, anyone that's in those areas, would personnel be able to have the ability to contact outside sources if in the situation of an emergency they needed to? So that was my concern.
There's a phone in every room that's
There's a
like
landline.
911.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, it gets called accidentally, because to call out, we have to hit 9. And then if you call out out of the 7-2 area, you have to hit the 1 and then hit it twice. So there is a 911 service in every single classroom. So if they have to do an emergency call and they don't have cell service, they hit 911. It gets recorded on our security supervisor, John, and his assistant on their phones. They immediately get notified when the police get notified on this system. So they know when a call comes out, it immediately goes to the 911 service, which is actually out of the sheriff's office.
Okay. I mean, the other thing that was also brought up, although it's, I guess, a touchy subject, I think a lot of parents were also concerned, although some students are not supposed to carry their cell phones throughout the day. In little events that have happened, the fact that children were able to communicate in case of an emergency with their parents, with 911, from their cell phones. I think it's also a talking point that maybe is it a possibility that could be revisited, whereas, I don't know. I mean, I understand that the children are there to learn that, to be there to have their phones, but
Are you
I
talking
think...
about, what level are you talking at?
Middle school. I mean,
I think
I
they can
just...
have their phones, they just have to
They
be
can
off and stowed in their backpack.
No, what
I
they
think
said
they were supposed
was
to be in
that
the-
they're in their lockers.
Yeah, that's my impression, they're supposed to be in their lockers. So that's
saving.
I don't, well, actually I have a meeting coming up with the assistant principals and staff. It's supposed to be Thursday, the meeting in Kingston. And I'll bring that up as a topic.
Yeah, I mean, as a parent, I would just love that comfort level. Even if my daughter is, playing a game when she's supposed to be doing something in the classroom, she should be absolutely reprimanded for it, but in the case of, God forbid, an emergency, just the comfort level to know that there could be some kind of communication would be wonderful.
Things if there's a real emergency where there's a lockdown or something, they're not supposed to have their phones, but I get it, and I will talk to them about that, and I'll talk to the security supervisor to see, what his opinion is on
appropriate,
that.
what's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's worth a conversation.
Thank you.
Mary Ellen, is it the same at River Plaza? I just had a question today about the same thing, about the teachers not having cell service in the basement at River Plaza. Do they also have a landline there?
Every room has a landline, but on your phone, they can get Wi-Fi, and they can do Wi-Fi calling on their phone. So even if you can't get Verizon or T-Mobile or whatever while you're in the building, you should be able to get your Wi-Fi. I mean, you're getting it, so we'll look into that. But every room has a landline. Okay, so that's, one security layer.
I know that our technicians have put out to all the employees, how to use the Wi-Fi calling, to Mrs.
Yeah.
Walker's point. Because you're right, there are some places that are not as strong as others, but we do have wireless hotspots all over the buildings, so.
But to her point, it was said that, the kids at that point were supposed to have their cell phones in their lockers, so if it gets revisited,
Yes.
that's
I'm adding it to the agenda
yeah.
right now.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, no, go ahead.
Superintendent again. I just wanted to bring up something that, Mr. Donovan, you had spoken earlier about discussing policy regarding legalization of marijuana as we enter into this new era. Right before I came here, I stopped over at 7-Eleven to get a coffee. And right on that counter, they had gummy bears with cannabis in it for sale. There's a difference moving forward in this world. We're not talking anymore about just smoking in school. This is something that's marketed towards children. I don't think that this is necessarily something that you can turn away from. You have to have some sort of policy. I don't know how you can have a no gummy bear policy. You have to have something that addresses the marketing towards children.
I don't think that it could have cannabis being sold because it can't, it's illegal to sell marijuana or a product.
I'm stunned.
Yeah, that's called the police department. But maybe it looked like cannabis, it said it.
Oh, no, it said it on the back. I read the ingredients.
Yeah.
We do have a policy as it relates to cannabis now, that we use, so.
Read it with my own two eyes. So my point is, it's a new world. We're developing new rules as we go forward, but
Make sure the policies are updated too.
yes, to address all forms of administration. Okay, thank you.
I would talk about it with kids, but what about the staff? Like when it's legal?
Adults are adults, and what you do off premises is really up to you.
You can't drink.
Our children are our children.
Right, you can't come to school drunk.
Again, that's the
Right.
same, you can't
So
come to
it's-
school under the influence. influence.
But off premises is off premises. I'm talking about in school. We need to make sure our children are safe. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else at the mic, I'd like to... Oh,
Sorry.
Rachel, I know you're
Okay, I'll be really quick. The first thing, Amy, will the tentative budget proposal, the presentation that you had up there, be available on the website to share around?
Yes.
Okay. Because I have to do that. I'm obligated to send it to BTA. And then my last question is snow days. There's been a million questions on Facebook about why doesn't Middletown build snow days into the calendar? So just so that I can answer accurately, can you fill me in? Why don't we build snow days into the calendar?
So,
Yeah.
if we put snow days in and we didn't use it, we'd be adjusting the calendar.
Okay.
If we don't put snow days in and we use them, readjust the calendar. So we do it as if there's no snow days, but if you look at our calendar, it tells you how it's going to be made up.
Yep.
First snow day goes this day. So if they want it in their mind, say, we have 3 or 4 snow days at the end of the school year, and know that that's a possibility, then they can do it that way. Either way, we can never judge. We're going to end up adjusting.
Okay, I guess that was my question. I wasn't sure if you budgeted 183, if you just left it at 183,
No.
regardless, you would take it back if they were to take it.
Adjust it
Okay.
back to
Yeah,
180.
so
Got it.
180 days. You
Okay.
know, we build it
It was
in.
it was a constant
85 to
adjustment
Yes.
every year, whether we didn't use them or we did use them, so either way, we're adjusting it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
glass half full.
Yes, no, it's, I guess maybe that's it. Everybody's freaking out, like, oh my God, the kids are going to school till July. And it's like, or you could have started and then just taken them away. Maybe people feel better about getting more summer as opposed to losing, I don't know. I just wanted to make sure I
When it's going,
understood
we're losing them.
why. I know.
Well, that's the mindset we worry about though, because then it's like, wow, it's not that bad of a day, but hey, we got one to burn, so let's just burn it.
And that's another reason.
Where-
I see what you mean, so, okay. All right, well, thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else at the mic, I'd like to make a motion to...
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Everybody be safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming.